to click on that. And then I need to move this down there. All right, so as Tommaso mentioned, Jim and I, this is joint work. We're talking about the emerging geography of electric vehicle production in North America with very recent data. I need to put in the disclaimer, so what we're about to present and share with you does not necessarily reflect anybody else's opinion, especially not in the environment of my employer, the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, or the entire Federal Reserve System. So now that we got that out of the way, we can actually talk about what we really want to talk about. And so I'm going to go to full slide. All right. Why is this important? We don't need to say anything else about that. The rapid increase of electric vehicle production and sales has caught on in the United States as well. Last year, over 1 million units sold in this market alone. So it's time to look again at the emerging footprint of the industry. And here's something different, fundamentally different in the way Jim and I approach this. We have written many papers about the geography of the industry together and shared much of that research with the GPISA network. So for the first time, we're actually working with forecast data. So let me just talk about this for a minute. Because it's common practice in the industry to forecast not just demand, but also production. And there's several respected vendors who put out very detailed forecasts. And so we're using one of them. And that gives us the opportunity to look out to the end of the decade, to the full year 2029. And the information is rich. So let me talk about what's in there. The vendor is S&P Global Mobility. They want me to mention that they change their forecast every month. So because it took us a while to put the data together and analyze them, the actual technical set of information that we're presenting is from when we pulled the data 6 months ago. We're working on a written version of this analysis where we're going to redo the entire cranking through the data shortly with a more recent version. It'll change specific numbers, but it's not going to change the structural findings, the principal findings that we're presenting to you today. But such is the fickle nature of forecasts. You can put a new one out every month, and a few of the numbers behind the decimal point will change, but the big picture does not. I mentioned that the key for us is that the data, why are we even embarking on this venture? It's because the data are incredibly detailed. So we can look out at production forecasts for all vehicle assembly plants in North America all the way through the end of 2029. And to make this even better, the detail includes production at the make model level, at the individual vehicle assembly plant level. And then to throw in as a bonus item, we also know the sourcing of both the engines and the batteries. And for batteries, we have information on battery cell and battery pack, specifically which plant anywhere in the world these 3 items are being sourced for a specific vehicle that's being assembled in a specific plant in North America. So that's rich data, which kept us busy deep into the fall. All right, so there we go. Let's jump right in. So in terms of how we're going to present this information, the majority of the slides are about vehicle assembly. And then we're also going to talk about the sourcing of engines first, and then batteries second, and then we'll wrap up with the conclusion. What do we learn from this exercise about what we think the impact of this move towards electrification will be on the footprint of the industry in North America? So as a reference slide, this is what the world looks like for 2023. Now, footnote here, because this data was pulled in June, so we're already at the end of January of 2024, but this is not data quite yet. In June of 2023, you still had to forecast what the rest of the year would look like. Once I pull the data in 2 or 3 weeks for the full production side, it's not going to look any different. All North American light vehicle plants, 75 of them or so, shown on this map. Scaled, the dots are scaled to precise, as indicated in the legend. These are light vehicles, so cars and light trucks. And anything that's in the slide, everybody on this call has seen before. The region that we refer to as Auto Alley inside that red box dominates production in North America, representing just over half of all North American vehicle production. Canada comes in just under 10%, and Mexico just under a quarter. The U.S. as a country makes up 67%. So, we're not going into detail about how this differentiates the by production mix for 2023, but we'll talk about this going forward when we look at the 2029 numbers. So this is our reference point. What are the major factors driving this agglomeration? Densely packed industry. This is what's the factors that have been working for a long time: agglomeration and economies of scale. That explains why this industry is not randomly scattered. So as we move towards the end point of this forecast, let's talk about the production mix that underlies this pattern. Okay. The data allows us to distinguish light vehicle units produced by the major powertrains. So there are 5 buckets. The 5th one is so small that we're not going to carry it forward. Fuel cell vehicles is basically at a de minimis level, even in 2029. So it's going to disappear from our analysis. And so then the 4 that we carry forward is obviously ICE. And then the 2 hybrids, hybrids without a plug and hybrids with a plug, HEVs and PHEVs, and then electric only vehicles, which are BEVs. And in 2023, vehicles with an internal combustion engine, which is everything but the blue segment here, make up still over 90% of the production. This is a bit different. We saw, I think it was Julia primarily talked about this from the and maybe the presentation about Germany too. In Europe, this is a little different. The ICE share, I think, has come down by at least 10% more, but this is what it looks like in North America today. And then just a few comments on how this varies across regions. So Canada is light currently on the production of battery electric vehicles. Mexico is disproportionately heavy on ICE vehicles, and then the US concentrates on the BEVs and the hybrids. All right. So what happens to this pie chart when we go to the end of our forecast horizon, which is 2029? 2 things happen. The pie grows just a tiny bit. It goes up from 15 to 16.5 million units, but the composition of production changes dramatically. ICE vehicles drop by over half. They go from 76 to 35. Hybrids double, essentially, from 12 to 21 and change. Plug-in hybrids double as well, but it's a relatively small sliver still at 5+%. And battery electric vehicles, go up essentially 5-fold. So that's a very different composition. And of course, as stable as the industry's footprint has been, even on the assembly side, that sort of begs the question, right? So what does this mean? What kind of changes do we see in where these vehicles are going to be assembled by the end of the decade? All right, so let's jump right into that. So what we're going to do now, we're going to disentangle this 2029 pie chart and turn it into maps, right? And there's a couple of ways we're going to differentiate these 4 powertrain categories. Let me just go back here. Battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids, those are the 2 types of vehicles that qualify for government support, for the consumer-oriented government support. So anything with a plug, we're going to group together. And then the traditional hybrids, the ones without a plug-in ICE vehicles, we're going to group together too. And then later, when we talk about the question of, well, what's happening to engine production? How soon is this going to disappear? That's sort of the public, debate question. Then we're going to group everything together that has an engine, which is the green, the orange, and that pinkish slide. So everything but the battery electric vehicles, because all 3 types have internal combustion engines in them. Okay, so much for the definitional side. Yes, so it's almost half and half, right? Battery electric vehicles and plug-ins make about 43%, and ICE and HEVs 56, according to this forecast for 2029. So let's map out the production footprint for both. We'll do it in turn. And so this is what it looks like for the conventional side, if you will, ICE and HEVs together. And you notice that it doesn't rock the boat, and it's not surprising because there's and ICE is obviously what we're producing today, and the hybrids are in quite a few plants already today, so you don't have to start over at all, even conceptually. So it's a slimmer version of the map I showed you in black and white, but the footprint is not changing for this side of the assembly. One additional element we introduced in this map, we distinguish now the color of the circles. We have red and blue, and that goes to where the headquarter of the vehicle, of the OEM is. It's domestic, that means headquartered in North America, which means for all practical purposes headquartered in Detroit, even though technically we include Stellantis in the red category, even though it's no longer headquartered there, but the North American headquarters for sure. And then blue is anybody which we lump together as international. Just to remind ourselves that while there is a strong, uniquely identified auto alley region which houses production, within that, there's also a clearly defined northern and southern half where the relative weights of red and blue vary quite a bit. So anything that's tied to Detroit tends to be north of the Ohio River. All right, and just for reference, in 2029, Auto Alley, that region that in a previous map I enveloped with that red rectangle, is a bit light on the production of ICE vehicles. It's 49%. The hybrids, 66%. 2/3 of hybrids are produced in the core region, according to this forecast. Okay, so let's go to the symmetrical piece. Let's look at the part that's growing. That's plugins and the BEVs together. The circles are smaller here. That's not surprising, right? Because we're growing from a low base, but they're now noticeable. They're not noticeable enough by themselves, so we actually went through the effort in labeling every individual dot. I hope you can see that on your screen. And we carry the red and the blue distinction here as well. So it's the sum total of the production is not quite as much. I think it's about 43% of the total. But it doesn't, production of battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids does not knock out the reference and the importance of Auto Alley. There's at the margin, there are two large red dots, and that's Tesla. The first full-size assembly plant in Fremont on the Bay Area in California, and then the second North American plant in Austin, Texas. So Tesla has moved much closer to Auto Alley from its origins, and there are plans underway to add a third North American plant in northeastern Mexico. That's on this map as well. So it's a little bit more dispersed, but the major location footprint of as far as vehicle assembly holds up, checks out. Okay. What's the situation for Auto Alley? What are the production shares within North America? That's respectable. Both plug-in hybrid and BEV shares are higher than ICE, which was at 49. So 50% of all North American BEVs are forecasted to be produced in Auto Alley in 2029. And for plug-in hybrids, it's even higher, just under 2/3. So you put all this together and what you take away from this is, interesting, really not a lot of change on the footprint. So let's extend that conversation just in one or two other dimensions. In the next map, we go on the looking at the gross change, which plants have opened, which plants have closed, and which plants have stayed the same during that 6-year period. So I dropped the labels. We make the map a little bigger. And then we introduce two different colors. If a specific assembly plant location gained production volume between 23 and 29, it shows up in green. If it loses volume, it shows up in red. If it's a brand new greenfield plant, it shows up as a hollow green circle. And if it disappears, if it's shut down, it shows up at a red X. Now, granted, the red X's are hard to find, but there are only two of them, one in Ontario and one in central Mexico. And there are only 5 greenfield plants that are going in by the end of the decade. These are all by conventional, well, with one exception, I guess. 5 of the 6 are conventional. Well, that's not true. 4 of them. So one is Rivian. That's an electric upstart in Georgia. It's their second plant. Hyundai is building a greenfield plant in Georgia as well currently. VinFast is building a plant in North Carolina. VW in South Carolina, that's for an all-electric vehicle, the Scout, and Ford in Tennessee. And then Tesla is building a plant in Mexico. So that's that big hollow green circle. And the shutdowns is one by GM in Canada and a joint venture plant by Mercedes-Benz and Nissan in Mexico. So it's just another way of saying there's not really a lot of change in the vehicle assembly footprint, which is a little surprising if you think about how radical the production mix across the powertrains is changing. So what gives? How can you have both of these things happen at the same time? So it turns out what's happening is it is relatively simple to reconfigure what's happening on the inside of a vehicle production facility. And we can look at how the production mix changes in each of these plants. So without changing locations, without building new plants, they're reconfiguring existing ones to accommodate a higher variation of powertrains. When you turn this into a chart, the pairwise bar charts measuring on the horizontal axis the number of variations in the powertrain that are produced in a specific assembly plant. So if it's one, they just make one of the 4, BEVs, ICE, or whatever, one only. At a particular year, and we're comparing 23 and 29. And at the very right-hand side, you make all 4. You make ICE, BEV, plug-in hybrids, and straight-up hybrids, HEVs. And as you see, the mass on this chart is shifting over to the right. On the left, you're measuring the number of assembly plants in totality. So that's the compensating variation. The footprint stays the same, even though the production mix is changing radically, and the way that gets accommodated is each assembly plant becomes more diverse in sense of what type of powertrains vehicles get produced inside that plant. If this wasn't possible, there would be the gross changes. You'd probably have to take about 20 in terms of the volumes of production swing. You'd have to take 20 existing assembly plants off and build 20 new ones if you couldn't accommodate the change in production mix internally. So I want to sort of make that point one different way. This is a somewhat busy table, but it makes the same point that the production mix is changing across the assembly plant system in North America. The bottom 2 right cells, where we measure the average output across plants, that's actually remarkably stable, from 200,000 plus to 213,000 units on average per assembly plant per year from 23 to 29. You can see by count of plant type and by output within each of these plants on average, the production mixes changes, but it doesn't affect the overall production level. So that's quite remarkable. So bottom line here, assembly footprint, rather stable, quite stable. And it's not surprising because if you don't have to build a new assembly plant, why would you? Okay, so that was the first piece. And so we're more than halfway done, which is good because we're more than halfway finished with our time. So let's talk about engines first, next, and then we'll talk about batteries for a little bit, and then we'll wrap up. So the next question is, where are the engines coming from for vehicles that need them? And so here's the one point in the presentation where we lump together all vehicles that do have an engine. So that's the traditional ICE plus the simple hybrids the ones without a plug, and plug-in hybrids as well. All three types feature an engine. And then we have a symmetrical chart. The one on the left looks at the production of all these vehicles and the assembly facilities shown in the black circles. I'm sorry, shown in the blue circles. I confused myself. And the black circles are the engine plants. There are fewer black circles because you have higher economies of scale in engine production. But the key message here is, as we've known for many years, there's a strong co-agglomeration of engine production and finished vehicle assembly. And in the slide on the right, gets a little, it's the same window, obviously. The volume of units shown falls just a bit because, battery electric vehicles are growing quite a bit over this time period. So that's taken out in this chart. Some of the dots disappear because they don't make vehicles with engines anymore. And 3 engine plants disappear as well. You couldn't tell, so you have to trust me, but 3 of them disappear. But the co-location pattern doesn't change at all. So the ecosystem gets adjusted for the slimmer volume footprint there. There's strong ties, the strong geographic ties between engine production and vehicle assembly not changing. Okay, so that's not surprising as well. So you're saying, okay, so far so good. You did all this work, but you haven't really found anything interesting yet. Well, that's debatable. But let's talk about batteries. And there we talk about the 2 elements of the batteries, battery cells first, and then we talk about the battery packs and the cells together. So 4 more slides there before we're finished. That puts us, I think, in good standing. So here we're looking at battery cell sourcing. Comparing 23 and 29. What we see very clearly, the sourcing of cells from within North America increases quite dramatically over that time period. It's expected to increase quite dramatically. So that forecast obviously factors in information about new cell production coming online to no small piece that is supported by substantial policy-driven funding through the IRA. So nearly 90% of cells used in the production of batteries for battery electric vehicles by 2029 will be sourced from within North America. Then the structure of who runs these plants is changing a little bit as well. I'm not really talking about that much, but at the very bottom, you see the enormous increase in production. So so the pie is, as we've seen earlier, is growing quite a bit in terms of, so now let's look at pack and cells together. This is the busiest table that we have for you during this Friday morning, afternoon, evening. The cell and pack plant count is both going up. Cell plants are increasing by 15, pack by 5. The really important piece here is on the top. You see the share of production filling in for somewhat for Canada and Mexico, but the United States dominates, both on the cell and the pack side, north of 3/4. This is data for 2029, the end of the horizon. And then sort of we break down the geography into more detail. What's important as a reference point, you can calculate the auto alley share. For cells, that'd be 55%. For packs, it's 65%. That compares to engines, internal combustion engines, at 56%, and battery electric vehicles 50%. So even on the that goes to the point that Jim and I are trying to make. Auto alley is not going away. It's holding its own in this new world. And then one of the 2 final slides then has to be a map, of course. So then we're asking the question, what do we know about co-location in the battery space? And the 2 symbols here, the 2 colors here, identify both cell and pack plants as expected locations and production volume for 2029. Cell plants show up in black and the battery pack plants show up in blue. Quite a few times they're identically they're in the same location, so they're as closely tethered together as you can with a a shipping distance of essentially 0. But these two colors are located even more tightly together than the engine and the vehicle assembly plants we showed earlier. So agglomeration wins the day. Very, very strong co-location. We do calculate that. This is our final table. Cell to pack distance is all 40 miles. Engine to assembly and pack to assembly is a bit longer, but still very close. You can cover all these distances in less than a day's full days of shipping. Right, so inside the box here, what I mentioned earlier, that and about half the packs are expected to be produced in the same location as the cells. Okay, so then let's wrap up to give us plenty of time for discussion. So we started by looking at this question: what can we learn about the medium-term future and this transformation of the North American industry towards electrification? In order to get that visibility, we are using vehicle production forecast data that allow us to take a very detailed look. And we ask the question of how the footprint is expected to change. And our answer addresses this in 3 pieces. The first one is we look at vehicle assembly plants, and there is very little change going on, and it's primarily driven by the fact that the existing network and the existing assembly plant facilities are able to accommodate this noteworthy change in production mix at their existing sites. Very few closures, and just less than a handful of new vehicle assembly plants built. So point number 1. Point number 2, what about battery sourcing? It turns out that vehicle assembly and battery plants feature very, very strong co-location. So since the vehicle assembly footprint is essentially unchanged, so is the powertrain footprint. Note that our analysis is taking place at a relatively aggregate scale. We're looking at all of North America together, and then within that, we spend a lot of time looking at the relative importance of Auto Alley. But at the micro scale, there can actually be rather dramatic differences, right? So it's very unusual. It's very atypical for a battery plant to be a converted engine plant. Typically, battery plants, either cell or pack plants, are greenfield plants that are new locations, and they don't necessarily follow existing locations. You don't necessarily build a battery plant right next door to an engine plant. So there could be at the micro scale, there could be substantial disruption. There could be intense discussions about state or local, regional government involvement, location decisions, things of that nature. That is not something we're addressing in this paper. Just wanted to make this point. And then when it comes to engine sourcing, that's the real surprise in this paper. And the way we get there is because we have the ability to look at this detailed data that really is able to finely distinguish the individual powertrains of these vehicles. Over the course, by the end of this forecast horizon, we find that there are only, again, this is according to the forecast, this is not data quite yet. But this forecast expects only 3 engine plants to close, 1 in Canada, 1 in Mexico, and 1 in the United States. And that's remarkable if you think about how radically the production, the mix of powertrain changes. But if you think about it, it also makes sense because the relative importance of the hybrid technology, the transitional hybrid technology, ends up muting a large part of the rise of battery electric vehicles, because every hybrid vehicle needs an engine. So the demise of engine plants is much deferred because of the relative weight of hybrid powertrains. And that's at least by the end of 2029, we don't see, according to this forecast, we don't see any radical shakeup and decline of engine production. The average production volume at engine plants comes down a tad. So between production volume dropping, I think for the average engine plant, it comes down about 17%, and between 3 plants closing, that takes care of the overall drop in engine sourcing. So that was the biggest surprise to Jim and myself. And with that, I'm going to give the last word to Jim, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Jim, do you want to add something to the presentation of Thomas?
No, when we get, let's move on. When we get to discussion point, I may, depending on the questions, I'll come in there.
Okay. Thank you very much for this detailed presentation, looking also into the future. And so let's shift to Holger, who will also talk about the future of mobility in Japan. Holger, can you hear? No, your micro was switched off. Now it's okay.
Now we can hear.
And you can see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, so my presentation today is quite different from what we heard yesterday and what we heard from Thomas. I'm talking about whether the Japanese automobile industry is going to change into a mobility industry. And I do that. Hold on. I talk about the driving forces which are accelerating new mobility concepts, new mobility policies. I talk about the Japanese automobile industry, the long-term developments, and how they influence this change. A little bit about the past program for spreading EVs and new forms of mobilities, which is titled From Utopia to Reality, and a small excursus into the K-cars, which is quite interesting because they are providing mobility to many people, particularly in rural areas. And then I talk about the evolution of new mobility policies, and finally Toyota, which has in 2018 announced that it will become a mobility company and not any longer a car manufacturer. So let's go back to, or start with the driving forces. And one of the first announcements, or one of the first institution which said, well, Japan, the industry also, ways of moving, ways of mobility has to change, was in fact the Intelligent Transport System Japan, the ITS Japan, which is mainly surveillance of traffic, collecting tolls at the highways, etc. And they came up with the challenges for the future, which is elderly, economy, energy, and ecology, and 1S, which is safety. I have here the elderly people, and this is not for not by mere accident or by mere. It makes sense to have that. You will see it in a minute. And I come back to the latest mobility vision, which is published by JAMA, or announced by JAMA, the Japanese Automobile Manufacturer Association. And they identify 3 megatrends, which is, first of all, the carbon neutrality, which Japan has committed to reach by 2050. The other is the digitalization, so case, connected, automated, shared services, and electrified or electric vehicles, and mobility as a service. and interesting, as I think, the post-corona new normal. So these are the mega trends, and they are somehow colliding, or they have to somehow be put in line with the socio-economic challenges Japan is facing. And there's, first of all, the demographic change. There is a development which is completely in the opposite directions. One is the urbanization, or well, it's one direction, urbanization development and rural depopulation. And then it's the risk of being affected by natural disasters. And as you can see on the picture on the right-hand side, this is a picture 26 days ago on New Year's Day. Japan was hit by a huge earthquake in Ichikawa prefecture. And so this is a real issue for coming up with new concepts of mobility. Then you have linked to post-corona new normal, the remote work and online shopping, and changes in value assessments, particularly also of young people. So when we are looking now more specifically to some of these issues, first we go to the demographic change. And we see that since 2020, the Japanese population is shrinking. And it's shrinking actually now with 0.5% per year. But this shrinkage will accelerate to 1% from 2060 onwards. And it's not just the shrinking population, but it's this age structure which is completely changing. And I have calculated two issues here. One, or two a population in 1955, which was or will be, in 2065, the population will be roughly the same like it was in 1955. But as you can see from the age structure, it's a completely reversed age structure. You have, in 1955, you had a third of people were under 15 years old. In 2065, there will be not even 10% kids here in Japan. And on the other hand, you will have 40% of people, almost 40% of people aged over 65, which was only 5.3% in 1955. So this has, of course, implications for the industry, implications for mobility, because elderly people will not any longer be able to drive. Life expectancy in Japan is the highest in the world. Average today is 85 years, and females are expected to cross the line in 2040 to become, so that life expectancy will be over 90 years of female population here. Let's move from that on to domestic production and so on. I just want to stress that production is continuously decreasing. Also, sales are decreasing. The export ratio is the only thing which stays quite stable. So you can also argue that domestic employment is only saved by keeping up a relatively high export ratio. When we are looking especially over the last, let's say, 40 years, 50 years, we see that at the time of the Plaza Agreement in '85, there was over 90% of production was in Japan. It decreased now to just a third of all the vehicles which are produced in Japan. Much more dramatic is the drop in domestic sales. So nowadays, only 16 cars out of 100 are produced by Japanese manufacturers are actually sold in the Japanese market. So the Japanese market is more and more diminishing in importance for the manufacturers. As I said, the same is the share of export in global sales is also drastically diminishing, and the export ratio stays the same. So when we're looking at domestic and foreign production, we see two different stories. The domestic production is not even stable, it's declining, particularly also due to COVID, while on the other hand, over a long period of time, production out of Japan, so foreign production is increasing. I go through these data slides a little bit quickly. So here you see that the impact of the Lehman shock in 2008, 2009, then in 2011, the earthquake in the northeastern region, and from then on, a steadily declining Japanese market as well as production and export. As we also see here in Japan, that the cars, so the types of cars are shifting, and we see that the normal cars or the small cars are squeezed between the K cars on the top and the standard cars on the bottom. So the standard cars usually are larger cars in, it's a little bit, how to say, formerly, there were only standard cars were over 2000 cc engine size. Now their standard cars are measured not with the engine size, but based on the size of the car itself. So basically, these cars are larger cars, let's put it this way, often with a larger engine, but not necessarily all of these cars have engine displacement over 2000 cc. So the trends, domestic sales, we see that the peak was in the 1990s and 2000s with 4.5 million units on average. This will, of course, be reduced also due to the demographic development. As I had said before, there is quite a little bit of a rebound in 2023 due to the COVID, so post-COVID, that people buying a little bit more cars, but definitely they will not exceed 4 million cars. Again, this is my prediction. So far, the Japanese automobile industry, to be well outspoken with that, the Japanese manufacturers will adjust to what the tendencies, what the trends are abroad. The domestic market is not important enough for the manufacturers, for instance, to go a single way or to prefer one technology which is not accepted in other markets. So basically my prediction is that they will turn to battery electric vehicles quite quickly. From utopia to reality, I don't go into the details, but already in the 1970s, Japan, led by the Ministry of International Trade, Ministry of Industries and International Trade, so MITI, was pushing for a shift to electric vehicles already. At this point, I would like to say that interesting is that the government or the ministries are more and more taking the backseat in these in constructing or planning future mobility concepts. It is more and more, or exclusively now, the industry itself, so the JAMA, so the representative body of the auto manufacturers and the companies themselves. The Japanese government, in a very like German way, is just setting the legal framework for that, but it's not really going into the planning of future mobility concepts and policies. The reason for that is maybe because all of these past plans have failed quite dramatically with regard to target size. For instance, there was the target 200,000 EVs by 2000. In fact, it was the actual number was not even 2,500. So this whole change, and also the approach of the government changed with the introduction of a new tax system, which is based on fuel efficiency and the support for so-called next generation vehicles, which are electric cars, fuel cell cars, natural gas cars, plug-in hybrids. The diesel engine cars are already next generation cars are not any longer treated as next generation cars, and also hybrid cars are not treated as next generation cars any longer. Okay, so what has this shift in taxation accompanied by some support schemes for buying ecologically friendly cars, the market shifted completely. So we see that until 2022, half of the car market are next generation cars, here including also clean diesels. But the bulk of these cars have for long been hybrid cars. Now we see a shift, quite quick shift to plug-in hybrids, and particularly to electric cars. I don't have the data for 2023. The last data I have is for until November, and plug-in hybrids and electric cars taken together were 140,000 cars, which is something like 70% increase from 2022. A small excursus into the K cars, which is important with regard to mobility and future mobility concepts as well. The share of K cars in all registered vehicles here in Japan is 40%. The K cars are more dominant even in the commercial vehicle segment, where there are 58% of cars registered for commercial vehicles are K cars. And there are some social implications. 44% of the K car drivers are over 60 years old. 90% of them never shift back to a standard car or a small car. Female driver share is 65% of these cars. Many use it for their profession. K car female drivers have a significant higher employment rate than drivers of other cars. The spread is, or the density of K cars is related to income levels, population density, and access to public transport infrastructure. So by no surprise, we have the lowest density of K cars in Tokyo and the highest in rural areas like Nagano Prefecture, Tottori Prefecture, Saga or Shimane Prefecture. Okay. The usage is also quite interesting. Average mileage is about something like 35 to 40 kilometers a day. So easily could be easily done with battery electric vehicles as well. So 68% of all the K cars are used daily, 16% almost daily, and they are used for necessary drives. So shopping, providing rides for family members, commuting to school or to work, doing business. 73% of K drivers say that they depend on the cars. And on the right-hand side, you see the Sakura Nissan, which is the best-selling battery electric vehicle in Japan. Right now, about 40%, over 40% of battery electric vehicle sales account, or the Sakura accounts for more than 40% of battery electric vehicle sales. The price starts with about 15,000 euro. Also, that's quite a competitive car. So now I go to the evolution of the new policies mobility policies after this small excursus into the K cars. The first was, in fact, not after the ITS, it was the Japanese automobile manufacturer's vision for automated driving, which was announced in 2015. The objective were simple: zero accidents, zero traffic congestions, free movement of people, goods, and efficient logistics of goods. Particularly then the aims of driving safe and more comfortable in densely populated areas, reduce traffic load, provide better and more convenient means for transportation in rural areas. Then there was the so spread into three different areas. One was the metropolitan areas, traffic in the metropolitan areas, and traffic between city areas, and traffic in rural areas. Still, the vision for automated driving was much focused on the privately owned passenger car. Then, only 3 years later, JAMA, so the Automobile Manufacturer Association, came up with the Mobility Vision 2030. And it goes every time it goes more specific: increasing safety, reducing ecological burden, increasing efficiency for transport, ensuring freedom of movement, and creating emotional value. This has to be put in line with the developments, the social developments, economic developments. So again, the demographic change, the change in consumer behavior, migration, but on a relatively low level from workers from abroad, the change to renewable energies, and of course the technological progress which is made. And so the objectives of this was simple. Again, zero accidents, zero congestion. We had this before. A little bit changed to zero ecological burden, and then maximization of mobility excitement, which is quite interesting. Still, the focus was on the passenger car. And only 2 years later, JAMA then, in reaction to the government announcing that it will commit itself or commit Japan to reach carbon neutrality by 2050, this strategy then was altered quite considerably. So what was the announcement of the government to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 was the one thing, and the green growth strategy was the other thing. The green growth strategy divides the economic sector, so the economy, into three different parts. One is energy-related industry, the other is production and logistic-related industries, and home and office-related industry. I think these divisions are quite interesting. Production and logistics, the automobile industry is part of that, together with the electric battery industries, which is new. So the objective is 100% electrified, not battery electric vehicles, but electrified vehicles in car sales by 2035, which will require the extension of the charging facilities for these cars, for plug-in hybrids, as well as particularly for battery electric vehicles. It's planned to have 150,000 new charging facilities until the end of the decade, which is something like a 200% increase from the actual charging facilities. Carbon neutrality, I talked about that. And the objective of this green growth strategy with regard to the automobile industry is to create a mobility society in 2050. New mobility services will re-innovate the movement of people and goods, promote social intercourse, and satisfy all individual needs, zero accidents, zero congestions, and so on. And we see also quite impressively over the last 2 to 3 decades that the manufacturers at the Tokyo Motor Show, now Japan Mobility Show, came up with ever new concept cars for these new kind of mobilities. And often they were perceived to be just kind of design studies, not really taken seriously. But I urge everyone to take Japan really seriously. So the Japanese mobility vision then from the JAMA mobility vision 2050 was announced only 2 years after the vision 2030 was announced. And in the preface of this of the Mobility Vision 2050, it is written, we have to change it because the environment is changing completely with the CO2 neutral announcement of the government. So again, I had it in the beginning of the presentation, carbon neutrality, digitalization, and post-corona new normal as the mega trends, and the underlying social economic challenges, the demographic change, the urbanization, the risk and rural depopulation, the risk of being affected by natural disasters, remote work, online work, and changes in value assessments. So what are the data for that? The data are some I already presented with regard to the demographic change. The population will shrink by 2050, so there will be 20% less people here in Japan. There will be an increase of depopulated areas in the countryside by about 20%. Already now you can see this developments happening. On the other hand, close to 60% of the people will live in the 3 metropolitan areas, so in the Kanto area, Tokyo, in the Kwansei area here around Osaka, and in Chubu, so Nagoya. 60% of people over there. 73% of all the Japanese people are facing the risk to be affected by a natural disaster, like we had a little bit than 3 weeks ago. You see the impact this earthquake had on the whole of Japan. On the right-hand side, this the magnitude and the actual the strength of the earthquake as it was felt on the ground of the people. 52% of consumption will be done online, so remote, and 66% of working will be done remote or online. These are the data for that. Finally, now I come to talk about Toyota, which is well, leading these developments towards mobility industry. And as I said, we should take this really seriously. And my assessment of Toyota is if they decide something, say, stick to that till the very end. So Toyota Akio already in 2017 announced that, or in a speech said that the industry is changing quite dramatically, and that Toyota has to react to these changes. And in 2018, the declaration of becoming a mobility company was done. And in January 2020, it was announced to construct a whole city where there was a location of a former Toyota plant for experimenting with new mobility concepts. So in 2018, then there was a very important new vehicle was presented as the e-Pallet, which was then also used at the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. For the athletes, for the transportation of the athletes. and also a new concept car was then presented in 2019. I go a little bit not so much into detail. One central aspect of this change is that Toyota is shifting its focus away from hardware more and more to software. And the basis for that is also the Toyota new global architecture, the TNGA, which is was used for the first time in the fourth Prius generation. The idea behind that, so software first, is to maintain for a longer time the value of the car by continuously upgrading the software of the car. For this purpose, Toyota separated hardware from software development in 2020, shortened off also the software development time, and introduced assistance over the air, that the software of the car is like nowadays computers, constantly updated regularly. So with this change, and particularly with the woven city concept, Toyota is moving into areas where a traditional car manufacturer usually is not involved in. So it is city management, operation system, city operation system, houses, offices management, energy supply and management, and also next generation mobility distribution. So this graph this slide should show the development from an auto producer, then going into the area of a mobility company, and the changing business model which is accompanied with that. And so the aim of that is provide values that by far exceeds the scope of the classical automobile industry or the automobile industry producer, and act as a like a startup, like a continuous startup company to try to catch new business chances and keep up also the company internal structure with these changes. So I already talked about the software first approach, and also a shift in the approach of the monotsukuri, or the production.
Holger, I'm sorry to tell
I'm too long.
Yeah, if you can move towards the
okay.
conclusion, also for your own sake, to not go to bed too late.
No, it's okay. I just I showed the slides of the woven city, which is, as I said, a new city on a former production site with vehicles which are all automated, which are all have special roads for these vehicles. Here you see the next generation vehicles for the woven city, all automated, all driverless, by the way, and of course all electric, battery electric vehicles. And the summary of this all is, will Japan succeed? Is it really moving to away from the cars, so to say, to providing mobility? And I would again say, take Japan seriously. First of all, Japan never relied on the car as a means for mass transportation. It was never, Japan was never ideological about the car. It has one of the best transport infrastructures, public transport infrastructures in the world. In the regions where the car is the dominant means of transportation, it is mostly K-cars. And finally, you have a well-educated population, highly sensible of their environmental issues, an unideological science-based approach to problem solving, a long tradition of effective use of resources, favorable geographical conditions for renewable energy generation, and you have the necessity to continuously improve the disaster resilience, which is one of the driving forces. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the CEPISA conference in Bordeaux, and that's all from my side.
Thank you very much, Holger.
Sorry. Please, Thomas, go ahead.
Yeah, no. Sorry to stop you, but we have
no, it's okay. I didn't look at the time, so sorry for taking too long.
No problem. No, it's just slightly. So we have the last presentation by Xieshu Wang that managed to join us. Hello, Xieshu. So you have 30 minutes, and then we will have all the discussion back together at the end. We don't hear you, so I don't know if your micro is deactivated or you have a problem with your sounds connection.
Is it working?
Now it is.
That happens. Now? Is it working now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for the chance to present the case of China. I will share my screen, right?
We can see it. Perfect.
Yeah, it's working.
Perfect. So I choose to title it as changing lanes to overtake because it's a term that the Chinese media used to describe how the China case EV industry has succeeded. So I will try to be brief because we don't have much of time. I'm going forward. I don't see him go forward. Okay, good. Can you all see the slides?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. So let me move this through. Okay. So first, I'd like to give you a general glance of how the China EV industry has been developed over the past decade, almost decade. So let's say the year 2015 was the first year that China has become a global power of EV production and consumption. So if you look at the graphic on the left, you see that that is about passenger vehicle, electric vehicle sales. So China, which is in red color, started to occupy an important part of global sales since the year 2015, and it was also the starting of the real takeoff of the BEV market in China. And we see for the year 2023, this is the estimation, but real data is kind of showing China probably taking almost 30% of the overall market in the world of sales. So it has been consecutive years, China being the first place in this.
I'm sorry to.
We can't hear you very well. We
think
hear
your micro is
a bit far away.
Is no, it's actually even worse. I don't know if it's possible for you to try just without your to see that the computer can, because it looks like there is.
Okay, let's try.
Yeah, that's much better.
We hear you a little bit louder.
Can you hear me?
Yes, that's much better.
Is it working now?
Absolutely, yes.
Hello?
Okay.
Yes.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a problem here. Wait. Let's share.
We can hear you. I don't know if you can hear us.
Sorry, I seem to have a problem. Can you still not hear me, right?
We do hear you.
Now you hear me, but
Yes.
I cannot hear you. What's my
Yes.
problem? So you can hear me, but I cannot hear you.
Go ahead.
Any technical expert can help me on the choice of this speaker theme system? Maybe try this one. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
I still cannot hear you. Okay, now I can hear you too. Oh, sorry for that. Let's
No
try.
Don't
problem.
worry. Don't worry.
Let's try going back. Okay, not everything fine. Can you see my screen too?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Hope it keeps working like this. So this is the data about the Chinese industry. Okay, let's move this. Also, it's interesting to note that as the Chinese domestic market kind of slowing down since the year 2018, it's interesting to note that the market, the sales of EV cars, they have taken over the trend. So now the most important growth in the market sales in China is NEVs. NEVs include battery, plug-in, and also fuel cell electric vehicles. Of course, the three types of new energy vehicle promoted by the Chinese government. We can see that, for example, for the last year, the production of a total NEV in China is almost 1/3 of the total production of vehicles in China, while also it's contributing increasingly to the export of Chinese automobile into the world. This year, the number is relatively lower than last year. So you see in the table on the right, because of increasing demand from Russia of Chinese auto imports, a large part of which is ICE. So the number kind of decreased compared to last year, which was even higher at 36%. And we all know that last year, China has overtaken Japan to be the leading auto exporter country in the world. So how to say, China is taking an important position in the EV consumption, but also about the exporting of EV cars over the world. Let's go to next page. I want to find this, but I don't know if I'm able to do that. So before we dive into the policy, which is the main part of my presentation, I would like to, maybe somebody will know you how I can find this. Try to pull it up. Not working. Okay, so it's a big success because there has been really a lot of factors that contribute together to the success. On the left, I just list, I think, the four major features of Chinese vehicles, because we know everybody talk about Chinese EVs. We say that it's much cheaper than currently than the European or North American cars. So it's competitive mostly at the price level. But also a lot of people confirm that the quality of Chinese cars and especially Chinese EVs are really increasing. And we are seeing recently a lot of announcement of premium cars. Also BYD is now starting to sell. It's really a high premium car which look like Porsche, and really like to compete with a premium car in the EV sector. Diversity, by diversity I mean the very diversified models of EV that China offer. Because if you look at the model each year, you have hundreds of models qualified to go into the market, from a very small, very low, how to say, which is kind of low competition on the quality, but which is very appealing to people which cannot afford high price EV. And you have different segments also, from the small and very compact vehicles to large premium, and to different scenario of usage. By speed, I mean the speed of Chinese industry to adapt to different situations, because the pace of development has not been really smooth from the beginning. But and also the firms, they have been capable to very fast invent different solutions to catch up on different aspects of the EV production. So generally, I listed several lines that I think are the major factor of the success of the Chinese EV sector. First, and quite importantly, fundamentally, is the support from the government policy, which has been really effective in pushing the industry growth, with constant monitoring adjustments and innovations of the policy making, not only at the central level, but also active at the local level. Of course, we say China has a very strong, how to say, advance, because the domestic market size is huge. Even we look at one major city in China, it's about 13 million, or it's like a city, like a country in Europe. So generally, the size of the market is very favorable for EV producers to quickly scale up. Then if we look at the industrial level, we know that China has been very intelligent and also very quick to build its own and really almost fully localized battery supply chain, which is a really advantage for EV makers, because battery is a core technology part and also accounting for over half of the price making of the EV. So by how to say, by mastering the battery technology and also containing the price, because the battery price in China has been continually decreasing for the last few years. I think it's almost more than half reduced for 6 years ago. So it's very important improvement also in the price level. That gives the EV production, EV industry overall advantage for the construction capacity. Also, because the EV production chain or motor production chain, in general speaking, is very long, and investing into technology as battery making, and also you have different technology of battery making, so that requires a lot of financing capacity. In the case of China, the government and also different actors in the financial sector, like investment funds, which can be government supported, it can be private, and we have different kind of banks that provide loans, continued, and also the stock markets, which provide investment in listed companies. There are a lot of financing sources in China, which is directed in the past 10 years, very concentrated in the sector of automobile EV. I'm talking of, so which also offered the chance to investment in different and very heavy capital projects. So gradually we have this vertical integration of EV production. We look at not only at the raw material at upstream, but also at the end of how EV are treated off, and also the important materials are recycled. Now this whole full value chain really is advantage for Chinese EV firms to continue to compete, not only at home but also outside. It's also important to confirm that entrepreneurship, for example, we have some leading companies like BYD, GD, and CATL. Their leaders have been really sensitive to the trend of the future mobility and has seized the opportunity together with leverage the government support and local market to really respond to this future trend by offering timely their products and solutions. In the case of China, I think, which is also important for the comparison with case in Europe or in America, there's a really close collaboration among different actors from the top, from the government. In the middle, we have the industries, we have different financial agencies. In the lower, I say lower because it's different sectors, but we also have, for example, in the R&D, we have researchers, academies, which all work closely to bring the case of EV to be realized. Environmental impact and social conscience is important, like we heard earlier in the case of Japan. But in the case of China, I think more appealing is digitalization, which is really taking a fast growth also in the last few years, and also about autonomous driving, which is going very fast in different scenarios in China. So I think we have to look at different forces from up to the down, from the government to the market, and for the industrial actors, and also the consumers' taste are changing. Chinese are more digitalized in general than other populations in the world, so they have this capacity to really quick embrace this change in mobility. Okay, I hope I'm going on time. A deep dive into the policy making. I think this is a part which interests a lot of listeners. In the case of China, the policy making has started very early, or even before 2000, there was already plans and strategy making, but the real start of the important central policy on EV sector and EV industry is really the year 2009. Then we have, until now, we can say 3 phases of development. From 2009 to 2013, it was the first kind of demonstration pilot programs and tests. So the government was testing how we can implement and help accelerate the implication of the EVs in China. And during this period, it was not going very smooth. And quickly, we find that by only emphasizing the public sector or only emphasizing on the government role was not enough. So we have to really push a lot of private demand side, we say demand side policies. That's why there has been important subsidies for the purchase, which was relaxed to the national level from the year 2014. And also different kind of tax was exempted for EV owners. And from then on, not only central government, but also local governments, they have implemented different policies and provided different kind of advantages for EV owners that really pushed the demand side to go very fast. But still we need a policy guidance to say which way we are going and what are the objectives. So if you look at the regulation standards that have been announced by the central government, I underlined in red the regulations or policies I think really fundamental for the growth of the EV sector. For example, Made in China 2025, we know it's not only for EV, it's also for AI, it's also for semiconductor, which is all directed in the same direction of, let's say, kind of mastering the technology and building the technology supremacy in China. And so from this, we say high-level strategy building, and also from different pilot programs and to direct subsidies to incentivize consumers. The year 2014-2017 was the essential period of a fast progress of the EV industry in China. Chinese government is also really, how to say, experimental. It can be criticized. For example, in 2016, in order, because we have seen that Japanese and South Korea company really had already acquired an important advantage in battery building for the EV sector. So Chinese government temporarily adopted a regulation which is for the power battery production, which is also named whitelist. Maybe you have heard of that, which imposed that EV model which is qualified for the purchase subsidy has to be equipped with battery produced 100 in China and by Chinese firms. So this kind of strategy is protectionism, which helped to really allow Chinese battery firms to have time to catch up with their foreign competitors, which were stronger at that time. And gradually, with the maturation of the technology and also Chinese firms improving their production capacity and also technology know-how, the government decided to lose this kind of protectionism and allow more market guide mechanisms, so allowed more competition. So now foreign battery firms can also produce in China, and which is the truth that they have been increasing their production capacity also in China. So Chinese government is not, they don't hesitate to put new policy or new programs to satisfy, to kind of like regulate the market situations, because we can, for example, facing the crisis of COVID, the demand for EV was kind of slowing down. So the year 2020, we saw that Chinese government announced an EV going to the countryside pilot program, as you can see, which continued until last year. So it's kind of like we see that the big cities are kind of, their demand is slowing down. So we have to push demand from development markets, so which is a rural countryside, but we have to select different models which adapt for this area, and with government guidance, so they kind of go into the countryside. So we see that there are a lot of also policy innovation in the overall making of the policy of for the EV industry in China. And year 2022, I think it was also important as released the energy conservation emission reduction for the fourth five-year plan in China, announced really a new direction for the auto and EV sector, which is focused on the energy efficiency and carbon emission, which will be the next challenge for the industrial development. I can go quickly through this because I already mentioned actually in the previous slides that there are central government policies and there are policies at the local government side. They are, of course, the local government have to follow the central guide, but they have a lot of autonomy in tailor different conditions to favor local EV implementation. In the central government side, we have already seen the policy evolution for the last 10 years. And more importantly here, I want to mention is the introduction of the dual credit system, which is a system that Chinese government tried to introduce to replace the former subsidy scheme, because now Chinese domestic market is kind of self-driven. It's not anymore government policy pushing, but we have still to provide incentives and how to say pressure for the OEMs to really accelerate their electrification. That's why Chinese government introduced this credit system to evaluate every year, every OEM for the cars they sell. If it's under certain emission standard, they have negative credits. If their car sales is qualified for the emission standard, and also they sell new EV, NEV, which will bring positive credits. So every year there will be a total financial credits for each OEM, which if the company in total have negative credits, they have to pay sanction or they have to buy credits from others that have positive credits. This credit system is still in the phase of test adjustment, but it will soon become a central system, a central policy for the future development of Chinese auto industry. I also like to mention the case of development of connected, autonomous, and smart electric vehicle, which is the case in the case of China. The policy is really providing a lot of space for pilot projects and also for demonstration projects in China. So actually, already last year, all the passenger cars sold in China, they almost reached 42% of intelligent assistance with level 2. Level 2 is just, for example, when you park the car or you need some very essential assistance, you can ask for help. It's not yet in autonomous driving level, but it's a first step for the car industry to changing into the future intelligent sector. And at local government level on the right, we can see that very important has been different practical advantages that were implemented by the local government to push the demand at local level, especially from the beginning, because the consumption demand from the customer was not yet there, and people were kind of, how to say, not ready for the new experimentation. So in different big cities in China, like Beijing or Shanghai, they introduced actually legislation to push for example, if you buy an electric vehicle, you have the priority for registration to get the driving plate. In big city in China, you know, it's a nightmare. People cannot get, they have to queue for a long time. They have to kind of buy the lotto and to see if they can win the chance to register their car. So this kind of policy, we can see it's really a preferential, very strong preferential policy for the EV, really pushed the very fast adoption of EV in big cities in China. Beyond that, we also have a lot of incentive for car parking, for charging, and for easy access to road in the city, which is especially highly controlled for the air pollution reason. So all this very practical advantage actually is very effective for the pushing the demand side. Also, not to ignore the the effort that the Chinese government has been putting for building the charging infrastructure, which is essential for the implementation. And since the phasing out of the central purchase subsidy since 2022, actually the government has been pushing even more on increasing the charging stations, which is accelerated a lot last year. So we see this typical way of Chinese policy guidance at different level, and also learn from experimentation is really effective in pushing Chinese EV sector. This page just give a general idea of Chinese EV firms. Now they become more competitive at home. Actually, the competition is really fierce at home. So now they have to seek opportunities outside of China. But we are facing different regulations, the coming carbon law in Europe, and also the regulation in US to pushing out the Chinese competitors. So they have to invest directly in where they want to sell in the future. So we see that, well, this is just last 2 years, 2-3 years. There's really a lot of Chinese battery and EV, especially battery, and also less EV firms. They are investing a lot in Europe to provide directly to local EV producers, especially German company, but also French one, and also Chinese company, which are now investing. We know YD just announced in December their plan to build the first EV passenger plant in Hungary. So this is the investment, but they are not coming alone. They also bring with them material suppliers. So we are seeing an overall exporting of the Chinese EV value chain or supply chain out of China and to develop in the global. There will be a lot of challenge. We already see that, for example, the battery firm of Cartel in Hungary has met a very strong local, protest, because Chinese firms are not yet very familiar with local environment. They have to comply to norms, of course, but they also have to increase communication with different stakeholders. So there will be also a lot of learning for Chinese companies going out. I can conclude here. Generally, the success of Chinese EV industry we see is a lot of merit from the national strategy making and a strong policy pushing, but also very important is local governments, which are very motivated on experimentation and also experiment different kind of solutions. Technology upgrading, very important, and also the domestic market for fast scale up is fundamental. We can kind of concentrate this different partnership in the success. In China, we say it's a 官产学园, means government, industry, academic, and research partnership. So there is really an overall coordination in the decision-making, financing, and implementation. Government has its role for fundamental research, for policy guidance, and for pilots for demonstration. University and researchers provide technology, and industry will implement, commercialize with the help with the funding also from the government. So it's an overall moving forward. And that's why Chinese firms has built their vertical specialization and competitive advantage, which allows them to going out to other destinations. This will be challenging for China and for the host country, but that will push for deeper internal collaboration and further accelerating the electrification at the global level. BYD is already totally electrified, but also other companies like Bike, Chang'an, Hanma Technologies, they also announced they are phasing out of ICE as early as 2025, so ahead of a lot of foreign makers. So I think I can stop here. So we see this overall expansion in the case of China, and also it will be more and more integrating the EV sector with the ICT, because it's very digitalized, and also with the energy sector, because if we want to decarbonize, the energy sector is fundamental. So in the last few pages, I just show you that you can look at it later. There are important policies. This I also already introduced about the dual system, which has been adjusted last year to make it even more strict for the EV makers, for the automakers in general. And also recently in December, Chinese government announced the automotive industry green and low carbon development roadmap 1. So it's the first national level guidance for the decarbonization of the auto industry, together and with energy and sector, and with also transport in general. So I think China is moving forward to also prepare it for the, the wars of carbon decarbonization, and also the difficult situation that we are seeing geopolitically. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Xieshu. Oh, we have a lot of things to discuss, and so let's open the Q&A. So we have 3 cases: US, China, and Japan. 3 different topics. Yes, each case has been looked from different perspective, a more kind of geographical perspective on the future of manufacturing for the US, focus on mobility, and the topic of well, how you combine green with mobility change, and more like the success story of the NEV industry in China and the key role of public policy. So that's quite interesting how you can approach this transition from their very different angles, and that's we know very well in GPISA, since they're all complementary. So I have, as usual, a lot of questions, but before I start talking, I let others take the floor, otherwise I would talk too much. Don't be shy. I know that there were questions in the chat also. I see Jim taking the floor first. Please go ahead.
To Holger regarding the use of electric vehicles of mobility for older people. The first fully highest level of self-driving hands-free application of a Tesla in my small town is an 84-year-old man who's using it to so that he can continue to shall we say, drive around town here, including the 1 hour to the nearest airport without having. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that.
Thank you.
Well, if there are, I will start with 3 quick questions. First, for Jim and Thomas, is what forecasting in the current configuration is pretty difficult, isn't it? Because things are moving so fast. If we move back, now you're looking forward into 6 years. If we move back 6 years ago, and well, show me anybody who has forecast the current state of affairs in Europe and United States, China, I don't think anybody did. So do you think that now forecasting gets easier because somehow the shift has taken place, and so most of the radical changes in policies, regulation, and technology and direction has happened, so you can trust more looking into the future because we have a series of investments on electrification, companies are readjusting to new scenarios. And also, I mean, I saw one thing that really is intriguing to me is that the production in your forecast increase in volumes, while everybody is saying that the cost of electric vehicles remains higher than conventional ones. And so it's difficult to imagine that in the shift from ICE to PHVs and BEVs, well, the volume will increase, because otherwise you have to figure out that the power of average people of buying this car, that their capacity will increase also. So how in your forecast there is this increase in volume? And so more generally, how do you trust your forecasting given the difficulties of the past years? So I will stop here for both the questions.
Let me start with this one, and then I'll let Jim finish our answer. Yes, Jim and I have moved into new territory just because we felt like it's important to not look backwards, because the data takes so long to curate. So just a word on how we think about this forecast. In principle, it gets harder to forecast. You're absolutely right, Tommaso. The company in principle can change the forecast once every month for the entire forecast horizon. We've already looked at how the forecasts are changing, and not surprisingly, the numbers are changing. But the general pattern that we're reporting on is not changing. And the general pattern is, and so that's independent of what the overall industry volume is. There's obviously a cone of uncertainty. Will there be an extra 1.5 million in 2029 compared to 23? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. If there's 1.5 million less, that's going to make a big difference to industry employment and things of that nature, but probably not to the question that we're interested in terms of what the footprint of the industry, what's driving that. I would be surprised if the mix changes radically between BEVs and hybrids and ICE vehicles. And in the chat, I think was Mark Alashay more than anybody else has pointed out that there are political factors, most notably the upcoming presidential election, that's going to shape the forecast going forward, no doubt. But there are other things too. I mean, in the fall of last year, there were several of the car makers based in Detroit who significantly slowed down the speed at which they wanted to ramp up EV production because things weren't moving quite as fast as they thought, despite the fact that they started investing serious money. That affects things 2-3 years out. By 2029, it's probably not going to change that much. Yes. So the bottom line is, it is a forecast. There's nothing, it is. We have to acknowledge that. But we feel pretty strongly that the qualitative conclusions we can draw from this, they're going to hold up. I mean, something radical would have to change for what we're concluding here to not hold, right? And it actually dovetails nicely with some data-oriented pieces we've done, where the window was, of course, much shorter, looking only to 2022 in the US and to Europe as well, in the last, presenting at the last 2 colloquia. Yes, there's uncertainty for sure. Jim, I don't know if you want to put another twist on this answer.
Which we're identifying as S&P Standard & Poor's, is the same data source we've been using for a decade now for a number of our papers and presentations that you've seen in this forum before, as well as in the journal and our Federal Reserve articles as well. The name of the company has changed several times now over the last decade as a result of acquisitions and consolidations of this automotive forecasting. So again, I think if we look back over the last 10 years of papers that we've provided for you, things seem to have held up reasonably well. The political uncertainty here in America, there's no it goes beyond whether Mr. Trump will return to the White House, in that more so than in other countries, the electrification has become totally political between the left and the right. And it's showing up as we move ahead into the years ahead. The country is going to be divided into 2 pieces: the electrified western coast and east and northeast, and the continuing to have internal combustion engines in the center of the country. That's a given. In other words, it's just like you would see Northern Europe. The game is over, isn't it? The electrification has won in Scandinavia, Northern Europe. It's over. All right, that's it. It's the same thing for California. It's over. Electrification has won, and the car makers have to or are on board with that's the way it's going to go. Here, where I am in a small town in the middle of the country, other than my 84-year-old friend that I just noted, well, actually, we're a small college town, and so yes, we have a lot of electric vehicles here. But basically, the middle of the country is going to stay ICE for the foreseeable future.
Martin?
May I just add something to this? Given this uncertainty, because there is obviously an uncertainty of demand, right? I was intrigued by the fact that the vast majority of car makers in North America are planning kind of a mixed production of electric vehicles together with conventional cars. Isn't this basically part of their kind of a strategy to deal with this demand uncertainty? Because in the mixed production, you can more easily change the proportion, volumes between, if there is not enough demand to go produce more IC vehicles. If there is more demand, you can more easily produce more BEVs. But overall, obviously, the BEV dedicated plants must be more efficient in terms of achieving scale economies, and therefore maybe more competitive. Right? But most car makers can't do this, right?
Well, it seems like all the car makers are hedging their bets to one extent or another. The North American based and the European based car makers are pretty much all in on electrification, but are marginally hedging their bets as to timetables on this. The Japanese companies, led by Toyota, who have remarkably managed to change their image in America from being the most environmentally sensitive, greenest, progressive company to being the most right-wing one, other than Tesla. In the last few years, they've made it plain internationally and in America that they are not all in on electrification. And so marginally, we'll see if things slow down on electrification, then Toyota basically wins in terms of North America. Yes, it's because it's already. But the car makers are too far along. I mean, what we've seen here is that they have been able to be efficient at equilibrating exactly how many of each of these four types of powertrains are going to turn out. I was interested in the Alfa Romeo Tonale, which is in a plug-in hybrid version, and it's sold in a Stellantis rebadges some of them in America as a Dodge. In California, that's the default. If you go in and to try and buy the Dodge Hornet or an Alfa Romeo Tonale, the default in California is that you will get a plug-in hybrid one. And if you work at it, special order, you could get the gas-only one. Here in Ohio, it's the opposite. if I want one of those, as I've investigated, I would have to special order it, and someday it'll show up as a PHEV. Whereas the default, if I went and bought one of those now, I would have to have a gas car. So all the car makers right now are basically dealing with North America as two different countries. California and the West Coast and increasingly the Northeast is the default is electrification of some sort or another. And out here in the where I am in the middle of the country, the default is still ICEs for the foreseeable future, except that Toyota and Honda are going to be putting out HEVs instead.
Lose you, Jim.
Okay, thank you.
If I may
Is
jump
it
in.
also, just one point, is it also related to maybe differences in purchasing power? You know, I saw a truck and BEV truck being sold for more than $100,000 in the US. So who's gonna buy this? Farmers in the Midwest? Are they kidding them?
So well, that's very tricky, right? Because the Detroit car makers are actually in not in a very comfortable place, right? If you own the pickup truck segment competitively, it does make sense from that aspect to electrify that part first. But of course, then you add the additional costs to the vehicle, right? So not helping with affordability. And they're realizing that. There's been a lot of talk about the slowing down of the growth of the BEV sales. But I did want to come back to a point that you raised. I think that's a very important point that you raised in your last question, Petter. And that's, where do you get economies of scale out of running assembly plants, right? And it's two things that drive it. So first of all, there's two strategic choices on. You can be a pure BEV player like Tesla and Lucid and VinFast. Or you're not. And if you're not, then you have to optimize. And that one table I showed you, we find that, you know, forecast or not, the expected production volume at the assembly plant level is staying north of 200,000. So you don't want to fall below that. Your capacity utilization needs to be up. I'm not sure how much of a hit they take by going from producing only one powertrain variant to multiple powertrain variants. But if you can keep up your output level of the plant as a whole, then you're much better shape than if you couldn't. And one other variation, and you see that with GM strategy, how they're trying to get economies of scale. All their electric cars are engineered to be running on the Ultium platform. So they get economies of scale across different platforms, which are produced in different plants, because they can share the engineering cost of the electric vehicle that way, right? But you're pointing at something that's hugely important. And I think that's worth looking into in a little bit more detail. That there might be some variations that we can see in our data, even despite the fact that it's a forecast. But thank you, Peter. Yeah,
the big thing that is of I think of interest for, you know, again, for geography. So Honda is here in my state, Ohio, right? That's where their first two and major production. They in Central Ohio, they get their engines most of the engines from Anna, Ohio. Anna produces 1 million engines a year. They get their transmissions from Russell Point in Ohio, again, churning out huge quantities of transmissions. The two large assembly plants they have here, again, these are all within an hour of each other here, this complex. It's not quite like Volkswagen, but it's, you know, we have quite this extensive Ohio Honda footprint. The two assembly plants here are in process of converting, and they're going to hedge their bets as to how many HEVs as opposed to BEVs they produce over these next few years. But the overall output of those assembly plants is not going to change significantly at all. Meanwhile, Honda is building a battery, the battery cell and pack plant, also here in Ohio, actually quite close to where I am. And so what we're going to see then is the assembly plant footprint is going to be, for Honda, will be totally unchanged. The transmission side of it, again, electric vehicles do need a transaxle, just as well, obviously different, but still comparable. But what happens to the 1 million units up at Anna, Ohio, and now the 500,000 forecast cells and batteries in Jeffersonville, Ohio? Are they going to move those? So Honda haven't been able to convert the engine plant over to batteries. They converted the assembly plants over from ICE to electric. So they're building this entirely new battery plant an hour south of their assembly complex. And meanwhile, there's the engine plant an hour north of their assembly complex. So at that micro scale, we don't know yet what's going to happen here. But as far as our geography is concerned, and as far as the state of Ohio's revenues and subsidies that are going out, it's kind of an indifference curve here between the engine plant that may or may not decline by we don't know how much, and the battery plant an hour south of the complex that will increase, but we don't know by how much. So it's all marginal, except for the employment and the and the food services that will be adjacent to these two factories.
There are two questions waiting, Martin and Mark. Martin, please go ahead.
Hey, hi. First, thank you for the presentation. And I was intrigued by the same point that Peter raised. So I was really surprised about the idea to have a higher mix in the production for two reasons. So one is really technical, that if we are in Germany, the car makers seem to separate plants into ones that are specialized to make BEVs and others that should still make the conventional car. And one of the explanations that you hear is that you need to have special training for high voltage batteries and systems in the BEVs. And the car makers usually conclude that separating the assembly lines or complete locations is better or more efficient than trying to mixing things together. So I'm really intrigued that the US car makers and probably the Japanese take a completely different strategy. That's really interesting. And the second reason is there like a similar regulation or requirement in the United States that maybe make this projection unrealistic? Right, because I mean, you work with the data set that you have, but let's say if you have a similar requirement in the United States that workers must have special training, special qualification to be allowed to work on these assembly lines, then this projection becomes meaningless, right? So any point you can have about that would be really interesting. Thank you.
I propose to collect some questions together because we're running out of time. So Mark, please.
Thank you. So I have a question for Holger. Just to go back to Japan for a while. So I had a question in the chat. As far as I know, Japan is pushing very hard for hydrogen for energy in the right sense, but the figures you have shown to us about the sales of FCVs are very low. So do you have any insight or forecast for future sales of FCVs in Japan?
Forecast, not really. It's sorry. We are collecting first. Oh, sorry.
Okay, we can collect perhaps some more.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, just is something that really is would have made the today unfeasible, but commercial vehicles are an important area for electrification. So, particularly in the U.S., box vans, so, sort of class 2 to 5 vehicles, and mining vehicles on various special applications. And then speaking to fuel cells, I visited a fuel cell component supplier, and they are working to fairly firm projections of 1 million vehicles by 2030 as their customer base. And now from this, most of it is the end of the decade, and this is heavy trucks in China and in Europe. They really aren't seeing much of a market in North America. So those are just two areas that have been outside the bounds of today, and probably not worth spending a lot of time given the other questions. I just wanted to raise it as an issue or something that we need to learn about. Thank you.
I would like just to add a question about the case, because we are thinking about making the call for the next JPISA colloquium about the fact that it seems, at least from European perspective, perhaps US perspective as well, that the combination of the four transformations of connected, autonomous, electrified, and shared or smart is kind of fading away. Perhaps because just car makers have not deep pockets enough to pay for everything, and so they have to pay for electrification, so they cannot pay simultaneously for autonomous driving, or perhaps because the technology wasn't ready enough and start to be clearer. But it seems that in Japan and in China, either because there's still money for that, or because there is more coherent strategies also supported by the state. This seems to be going on. So if you could spend some, because clearly the Holger presentation was very much on mobility change, while actually this is really out of the agenda in Europe right now. There's still things about data, or but nobody's really talking anymore about autonomous driving in Europe right now. So that would be my question to all of you, on the top of the others that have been made.
If I can jump in on Martin's question, which is really a sequel to Peter's question. This is something we can actually do a little bit more work with in terms of the data. One component was, are there work requirements? I'm sure from within the UAW, there's probably some OSHA regulations that do apply. The other thing that comes to mind is a number of the assembly plants in our data set here in North America actually have multiple lines. So one way you could do all the things that you see in the data, not all of them, but a significant part, is you can put the BEV on one line and then all the other three powertrains on the second line, right? And that way you can have a dedicated, you can separate the workforce within the plant, and then in the aggregate, the way it appears to us, the plant as a whole with more than one line, would in the limit could make all four variants of the powertrain. But so the devil's in the detail here. We can pay a little bit more attention to the nitty-gritty detail, and we probably should do that. There are also possible variations of how this is attached to the OEM strategy, right? You can go down in silos and you make distinct vehicle platforms that you engineer from the ground up, or you can go across where every make model appears in each powertrain bucket. And both of those strategies would have different implications in the ability to share cost effectively, mix and match these powertrain variants on the same line. But it's an important point, and there's a little bit more digging we can do in terms of the data. Thank you.
Okay, if I may answer first the question of Mark. The actual data for cars, or the fuel cell cars here in Japan, is 7,500 cars are registered here in Japan. What the industry, I've been to a industry conference on hydrogen here in Tokyo, and the industry is very much not the car industry, but the industry as a whole is very much pushing forward with hydrogen technologies and extending production of hydrogen, importing hydrogen. And another observation is that I was last year in Toyota, and the Toyota Kaikan, so the showroom of Toyota in Toyota City, is much about hydrogen, not so much about battery electric vehicles, but the future as displayed by Toyota is hydrogen. The government policies in the green strategy is to extend the hydrogen stations, so the filling stations for hydrogen for cars, to 1,000 stations by 2030. I don't know the exact number right now, but this is the projection for 2030 to have 1,000 hydrogen filling stations for cars. And with regard to the question from Tommaso, I don't know how much money is going into this research of autonomous driving, but at least from all the publications with regard to the mobility developments here, it is all based on autonomous driving. And one thing is, and this was a very important remark, it is because of the people, the elderly people, who might depend on a car, but they are not able to drive the car. So they might order the service of a automated drive taxi, for instance. So I think, again, the demographic change is driving this still further. I have to look deeper into how much money goes into this research.
And with regard to hydrogen, my sense is that hydrogen is where electrification was 20 years ago or so, in that, well, I get, I hear from a lot of people, and there seems to be very, shall I say, fanatics about hydrogen that are out there, and the numbers just aren't there right now. They're not close to being there right now. And they're not there in terms of the 6-year time frame that, again, Thomas was telling you at some length that this isn't typical for us to try to forecast into the future. But what I get is people. For example, I teach a course to older people in a retirement school here on electric vehicles, and every term I get somebody who just wants to say, no, what about hydrogen? It's the numbers aren't there. They're not there for the next few years. Will they? But that's where battery cells were, say, 20 years ago. So is it in the future? Probably, but not the time horizon that even we, with marginal comfort, can work with.
Xieshu, what about China? Because I remember, for example, Boy Lutke was very positive about the role of internet company in China taking some place in the auto industry, like 3 years ago, in the aftermath, a little bit earlier, when the Made in China 25 came out. And now it seems to be a little bit more reluctant to buy into this idea that big internet, a Chinese company through, say, shared driving or Uber-like service will take over or will play a crucial role. But you seem to indicate that autonomous driving is still in the agenda, and then connected cars are still important. So what kind of evidence you would have in mind to sustain that this is actually happening? Three things.
Yeah, thank you, Tommaso. Firstly, we see that from the policy making, there are continually mentioned about the case in all the policy making about auto industry of the future and also about energy efficiency. It's almost every time it appears about the case. And I just quickly look up some data about investment. It said that since the year, I think it's the same year as the EV took flight. So since the year 2015, there has been an increasing investment in the case. So they said, I don't have the data of 2022, but in 2021 in China, no, it's not only in China, but there has been increasing investment. No, it's about China because I'm not sure it's about China or global, but 2021, there has been 111 investments related to the case, which amounted to about almost 50 billion yuan. So it's a huge amount of capital which is going into the industry. And also, just I mentioned, data last year showed that the level 2 already arrived at 42%. That means that all the car average, almost above 1 of 3 cars, new cars sold in China last year had level 2 assistant driving. It's not a small issue, although it's still low as level. But the objective of the Chinese government in the plan of which I just mentioned in annex of the auto industry green and low carbon development plan said that it will also push the case, and it seems that there was an objective also, I think I missed, that for this year, 2024, the level 2 will reach 55%, and also expected to commercialize the level 3 in the coming 3 to 5 years. So it's quite close. Kind of like over optimistic. I see the face of Holger, but it's something I continue to hear even about from my friends, from my contacts in China. Everybody told me now we talk about car, it's almost about intelligent, digitalized, and it's becoming the standard. So I think it's also related to the China seeking to be independent on the semiconductor industry. They are investing a lot, and it's kind of like they are pushing on the policy side with the investment from the government fund. Then they have to be commercialized. So there is the objective to localize the chips for the intelligent cars fast in China. So all this go together with money from government, with money from the market, with money from the companies, and know that there has, I think it's over maybe over 30 cities in China. They have already pilot projects of autonomous driving, at least the tests. They have a lot of test zones in a lot of cities in China, and several cities, I think, they are already putting out regulations about robotaxi, about non-manned driving. So the regulation are also following. So I think in China, this is a thing that will come true. I cannot say that will become very fast unmanned driving in China, because it's very complicated also the situation in China with so many differences from one region to another, but it's a growing thing and growing very fast.
Just on that, Thomas, perhaps there's been recently the symposium of the Fed on the auto industry. I haven't followed everything, but it seemed to me that this topic was not really at the core of your debates and analysis. Is that right, or that by comparison, but the autonomous car, the Waymo, the Uber, all the experimentation with the robotaxi that was really hyped, like say 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I got the feeling that was not really on your agenda. Am I right?
That is correct, and that has been way dialed down. In terms of business case and business model. There's some, GM has they spun off their unit, their Cruise, and there have been some significant issues in terms of their business model going forward. Yes, it was not on the agenda at all. And of the 4 elements in case, that's the one that's probably been dialed down the most. It's a much longer haul for this to become profitable. It appears, based on the evidence from the financial press. So, but yes, you read that right, Tommaso.
With one
by the
footnote,
way-
which is that Tesla is still committed to it.
We're talking about autonomy. People can commit to all the things they want, but autonomy is lagging far behind electrification. So
I would just want to say that the symposium took place 1 week ago, but there is still replay available, and for all of those who are interested in North American development, is a very interesting series of videos to watch. They're just some advertisement, but if you yes, so but because it's really a high level kind of, we have government representatives, industry representatives, so it's very interesting videos. Okay, I think we are reaching more or less the planned end of our conference, but still, since we started a little bit late and perhaps there's still a couple of questions that need to be asked, so please take your chances if you have not done that yet before we close down. Oh, it doesn't seem to be. Yes, Xieshu?
Just I don't know if it's really related. I want to know how about the new development of, for example, V2X, V2G in other countries. I don't know, in the US and in Japan. In China, they are pushing a lot, but I don't see a really fast progress. I want to know about the other geography. Thank you.
And Martin and Mike, you still have a question to make, or you just forgot to put your hand up? You have a question. Okay, Martin and Mike.
Oh, well, the biggest market for LiDAR is in China. So Hesse and RoboSense. RoboSense has a very a corporate name in Chinese unrelated to anything of what they're doing. So there's a lot of level 2, level 3 moving forward in China. In the comparative driving stuff that I've looked at, all of it in Chinese, Tesla does not rise to the top in their capabilities. So there are also test fleets of robo-taxis, but I'm skeptical that that's really financially viable given the cost of the vehicles and the many challenges in that market. But there are a couple players in China that are comparable to, say, Waymo. Guidehouse Insights, a consultant by the name of Sam Abuelsamid, runs a group there that benchmarks sort of autonomy, ADAS systems, and their latest report tracks 14. So of those, Chinese players are a couple of the top ones, and Tesla ranked 14 out of 14, so they were dead last on multiple criteria. So they have big PR machine, but their ability to actually deliver on their promises looks to be a failure. They're vision only, and they simply can't do what they say they want to do without adding. They don't even have radar, so they keep running into things like semis ambulances at traffic stops and on and on. Fuel cells, what I see is zero going into passenger vehicles. So again, there are a lot of commercial vehicle topics, but the fuel cells and forklifts, for example, are another market for fuel cells. But those are things remote from the passenger vehicle markets that have been the main focus of most of the people in Jarapisa.
Thank you, Mike. Martin, you had another question, is that right? Or not?
Yeah, just quickly. So maybe for Holger, you explained very well that Japan was, and to some extent maybe still is, very neutral when it comes to guiding technology, which is pretty different from what we heard about China and what used to be very similar to the German approach, because the German companies couldn't really agree what direction they wanted to go in. So I'm curious if you think that because you mentioned that the Japanese car makers are probably going to just follow the market trend, do you think that the government will change this really neutral policy stance to focus the policy more on BEV, or do you think that they will stay committed to supporting all types of different powertrain options, as they have done in the last, let's say, 30 years?
Well, the projection, or my thinking is that because of the diminishing importance of the Japanese market for the Japanese manufacturers, that they will follow where the trend is abroad. So in Europe, they will go battery electric vehicles. I'm very much convinced about that. The other thing is, I think the pressure is the other way around. That is from the manufacturers towards the government to say you have to do something with regard to low carbon energy. And they are much concerned about producing in Japan if there is no supply of this low carbon energy, so that they might face some penalties from countries which are implementing these kind of border adjustment mechanisms like the EU is discussing. And so still the industry or Toyota is much into this hybrid and plug-in hybrid as a transition technology. But in the end, I think they will go where the main trends are in the main markets. And these are, first of all, in the vicinity, and this is China.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I think we reached the end of this day of discussion of our 2 days conference. We've gone through 6 different case studies with a different perspective and different questions and debates. So all of that contributes to the wealthy of debates we have in Jarapisa. Stay tuned about the call of Jarapisa. Is going to come out very soon for the next colloquium. We have a steering committee tomorrow for those who are steering committee members to discuss also about that. And so remember just that there is the call will be out soon with the dates that are already on the internet site. The internet site has been updated with the last number of adjustment for those who want to read some more. So there is 10 new articles available from the adjustment, plus double number on the site. And the report by Marc Alochet that we put on the homepage that he has written and has been cited by the ICA, where Marker compares the regulations in China, Europe, and United States, which is also very, very interesting. So I just do some more advertisement about that. And so I hope to see you soon for the next virtual meetings, and looking forward also to our meeting in Bordeaux.
So we will
What time
see each other
tomorrow?
tomorrow for those who are steering committee members, and for the others, see you in June in Bordeaux at the latest.
What time tomorrow for the steering committee?
The same time, 1:30 Central Europe time.
Okay, thank you.
And it will be shorter, of course, since it's Saturday.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.